Part 1 Introduction. Every morning, before your feet even touch the ground, life has already shaped you. Not through inspiration or clarity, but through the quiet bruises you picked up the day before. The pressure you didn't acknowledge, the disappointment you tried to swallow, the fear you pretended wasn't there. These things accumulate the way winter frost gathers on a window. Slowly, silently, and then all at once you wake up and realize the view in front of you is distorted. Your mind isn't broken. It rarely ever breaks in one dramatic moment, but it is worn, scratched, weathered. And what's subtle is often the most dangerous because subtle damage is easy to ignore. Most of us start our mornings on autopilot, believing that because the mind sits inside us, it must somehow be self-repairing. But the ancients never thought that way. To them, the mind wasn't a machine. It wasn't a vessel of infinite strength. It was architecture, fragile, shaped by impact, strengthened only through deliberate maintenance. The Stoics lived in a world far harsher than ours. The uncertainty of empires, the weight of political chaos, the constant reality that tomorrow wasn't promised. Marcus Aurelius didn't just write meditations. He wrote under the pressure of war and plague, often with the empire's survival depending on his clarity. Epictetus didn't preach toughness from a quiet retirement. His worldview was shaped by the cruelty of enslavement and the calm that only philosophy could give him. Seneca saw his reputation, his status, and even his security collapse at different moments of his life. These were not abstract thinkers. These were men whose wisdom was forged in fire, not scribbled in comfort. They didn't speak of mental resilience the way self-help books do today. They lived it with every blow life dealt them. And they all agreed on one universal reality. Every day something damages the mind, and every morning you must repair it. Not because you're weak, not because you're fragile, but because you are human. This isn't about creating a life free from stress. History shows that no emperor, no philosopher, no ordinary worker has ever found such a life. It's about refusing to let yesterday's storms dictate how today will be lived. In a world where everything competes for your attention before you've had a moment to breathe, the first act of the morning becomes a moral choice. Will you step into the day carrying yesterday's weight? Or will you begin again, leer, intentional, fortified? Today, I'm going to share with you some simple ways to heal your spirit. Not rituals that require an hour of silence. Not philosophical puzzles that require a degree to understand, but small, practical actions to maintain. These healing methods will address the cracks you may not see but feel. Seneca once wrote, "Begin at once to live," not in the abstract sense. He meant quite literally, treat each morning as if a new life has been handed to you. A clean slate if you choose to clear it. So before we begin, ask yourself a simple but uncomfortable question. Are you starting fresh, or are you starting burdened? Only one of those paths builds a stronger mind. Part 2. Why this pattern appears repeatedly throughout human history, and why it still controls us today. Before we can understand the power of this mechanism, we must go back, far back, to the ancient world, where the Stoics first noticed something strange about human behavior. Humans have always lived in two realities at once. 1. The world as it actually is. 2. The world as we interpret it. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. He meant, we do not respond to events. We respond to the story we tell ourselves about those events. And this single distinction between what happens and what we believe is happening has shaped wars, relationships, politics, and entire civilizations. The ancient context. In the ancient marketplaces of Athens and Rome, misunderstandings were common. A man might walk past his neighbor without greeting him. The neighbor assumes he is being insulted. Two soldiers might receive the same order. One interprets it as discipline, another as personal attack. A student hears a correction from his teacher and interprets it as humiliation, not guidance. The Stoics noticed that the source of conflict was rarely the event itself. It was the internal frame, the invisible mental lens through which the event was interpreted. But here is the part people forget. The frame forms automatically. It forms without your permission. It forms from your fears, wounds, insecurities, and memories. This is why the Stoics believed the untrained mind is not free. It is reactive, impulsive, easily provoked. The modern context. Now fast forward 2,000 years. Nothing has changed. If anything, the mechanism has worsened. Our ancestors faced a few dozen interpersonal signals each day. You face thousands. A text message, a comment, a notification, a tone of voice, a delayed reply. All of them filtered through a mind that is constantly guessing, projecting, assuming. You receive a short message. Can we talk later? Your mind fills the silence with a story. Something's wrong. They're upset. I made a mistake. They're pulling away. But the story is just that. A story. The Stoics understood that guessing is a primitive survival mechanism. Your brain evolved to detect threats, even imaginary ones, because a false alarm was safer than missing a real danger. In the modern world, however, this ancient survival mechanism becomes emotional sabotage. Why context matters. To solve a problem, the Stoics always began with one question. What is actually happening here? Because if you misread the situation, you will misreact to the situation. This is why we need context. Your mind interprets before you are even aware of interpreting. Your emotions follow the interpretation, not the event. Your behavior follows your emotions, and your identity is shaped by your repeated reactions. Context is the battlefield. If you misunderstand that battlefield, you lose before the fight begins. The Stoic warning. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." But he was not being poetic. He was describing a psychological law. Your interpretation is the true source of your suffering. And unless you learn to question the automatic story, you will remain trapped in it, a prisoner of your own unexamined assumptions. Part 3. How this psychological pattern quietly hijacks your emotions, your decisions, and your identity. To understand why this pattern controls you, you must see the machinery beneath it, the invisible chain reaction that begins long before you feel anything, long before you speak, long before you act. Most people believe emotions come first. They think, I felt angry, I felt anxious, I felt ignored. But the Stoics revealed a deeper truth. Emotion is not the beginning. Emotion is the consequence of an unseen judgment. The real origin lies before the feeling, in a place most people never examine. Let's break the mechanism down. 1. The trigger, an event without meaning. Every episode begins the same way. A message, a look, comment, silence, a delay, a tone, a change in someone's energy. Objectively, these things mean nothing. They are neutral, empty, unloaded. But the mind cannot handle emptiness, so it fills it. 2. The automatic interpretation, the story your mind creates before you know it. Your brain is a prediction machine. It is always guessing, always interpreting, always trying to assign meaning. I think they're upset. I think I did something wrong. I think they're judging me. I think I'm being excluded. I think this is a threat. The Stoics called this the prohairesis in its untrained state, the mind reacting automatically, without reason, without clarity. This interpretation happens faster than thought, faster than language. By the time you notice a feeling, the interpretation has already taken root. It's a reflex, a survival instinct, a primitive attempt to control the unknown by assuming the worst. 3. The emotional response, you feel the story, not the reality. Here is the critical moment. You do not emotionally respond to what happened. You emotionally respond to what you believe happened. This is why Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed, and you won't." He did not mean suppress your emotions. He meant, if you examine the judgment, the emotion loses its power. Because the emotion is loyal to the story, not the event. Change the story, and the emotion dissolves. 4. The behavioral reaction, you act on the emotion instead of the reality. Now the chain becomes dangerous. You withdraw. You lash out. You become cold. You overthink. You spiral. You self-protect. You retaliate. You try to fix something that wasn't broken. You chase clarity from people who weren't confused. All because you are reacting not to the world, but to the world as you imagine it. This is why the Stoics believed an unexamined impression is the root of all suffering. 5. The identity reinforcement. You become the person your reactions rehearse. Here is the final stage, the one most people never notice. Your repeated reactions become your habits. Your habits become your character. Your character becomes the story you tell about yourself. I am an anxious person. I get attached too easily. I'm sensitive. I'm easily hurt. I always overthink. I have trust issues. But these are not identity traits. They are the residue of unchallenged interpretations. And slowly, silently, you become a character shaped by fears rather than reason. A self built from guesses rather than truth. The Stoic insight you must not ignore. The Stoics did not try to eliminate emotion. They tried to eliminate false judgments because false judgments are the root of unnecessary emotion. Their method was simple. 1. Pause. 2. Examine the impression. 3. Strip it of assumptions. 4. Respond only to what is absolutely real. Because if you do not question the first interpretation, every step after it is already lost. You cannot control the trigger. You can only control the meaning you attach to it. And in that meaning lies your freedom or your suffering. Part 4. Where this mechanism secretly controls your life today. Texts, relationships, social media, conflict, miscommunication, and identity. If the ancient Stoics lived today, they would not be lecturing in the agora. They would be observing group chats, Instagram stories, unread messages, and silent notifications. Because this is where the modern mind reveals its greatest distortions. The mechanism we described is ancient, but its battlefield is new. Today, you are surrounded by invisible triggers, tiny signals that your brain interprets as threats, judgments, rejections, disappointments, or social danger. And these signals arrive constantly. Let's break down how the same ancient psychological mechanism operates in modern life, often without you realizing it. 1. Text messages, the most dangerous mirror of your mind. A simple message, okay, sure, or silence. None of these have inherent meaning, but your mind rushes to fill the void. They're upset. They're done with me. They're annoyed. They're losing interest. I must have disappointed them. You don't feel the message. You feel the story you attach to the message. The Stoics warned that the untrained mind creates phantoms, ghosts of meaning that frighten you but are not real. In the modern world, your smartphone is the perfect breeding ground for these phantoms. 2. Relationships, where interpretation becomes emotional gravity. In relationships, this mechanism becomes even stronger. Partner is quiet. You assume distance. They're stressed. You assume it's your fault. They forget to text. You assume neglect. Their tone changes. You assume anger. You don't react to them. You react to your inner narrative about them. And slowly, a relationship becomes a tug-of-war not between two people, but between two imaginations, two projections, two unspoken fears. This is why Epictetus taught, if someone provokes you, remember that it is your judgment that provokes you, not their words, not their silence, not their behavior, your judgment. 3. Social media, a daily assault on your interpretive weakness. Social media weaponizes this mechanism perfectly. A friend views your story but doesn't reply. Someone likes your post but ignores your message. A person posts something vague, and you think it's about you. People meet without you, and you interpret exclusion. You see success online and interpret personal failure. Nothing on social media is neutral anymore. Your mind assigns meaning to everything. And in doing so, you compare. You envy. You feel behind. You feel watched. You feel judged. You feel invisible. Not because the platforms are dangerous, but because your interpretations are untrained. 4. Conflict, the battle of imagined intentions. Most modern conflicts do not arise from facts. They arise from perceived intentions. He said this because she did this too. They probably think. We fight ghosts. We argue with assumptions. We confront people not for what they did, but for what we believe they meant. Marcus Aurelius warned, "Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will always bubble up if you only dig." Conflict becomes manageable the moment you stop interpreting motives and start observing facts. 5. Misunderstandings where the untrained mind destroys peace. Misunderstandings today spread faster than truth. You misheard. You misread. You misinterpreted. You assumed. You reacted. You accused. You shut down. You spiraled. And hours later or days later, you discover the truth was simple. They weren't ignoring you. They were busy. They weren't angry. They were tired. They weren't losing interest. They were overwhelmed. They weren't judging you. They were distracted. Epictetus would shake his head at the modern world. Because we live in a reality where assumptions travel faster than clarity, and most people never pause long enough to question them. The modern crisis the Stoics foreshadowed. The Stoics could never have predicted smartphones, but they predicted the crisis of interpretation perfectly. Because whether it is a text message, a tone of voice, or an Instagram post, the mechanism is the same. 1. A neutral event. 2. An automatic interpretation. 3. An emotional response. 4. A behavioral reaction. 5. A reinforced identity. This loop, not the world itself, creates most of your suffering. The modern world accelerates the loop. Stoicism interrupts it. Part 5 and the identity shift, the closing message, and the final Stoic challenge. At this point in the journey, something should be clear. Your suffering was never created by the world. It was created by the meaning you unconsciously attached to the world. But now you stand at a crossroads, the same crossroads the Stoics spoke of 2,000 years ago. A person with an untrained mind walks one path. Reactive, emotional, easily shaken by assumptions and imagined threats. A person with a trained mind walks the other. Calm, deliberate, sovereign, unmoved by interpretations that collapse under scrutiny. This is the moment where you choose who you are going to become. The identity shift from reactor to observer. Most people live their entire lives as reactors, reacting to messages, reacting to moods, reacting to silence, reacting to their own assumptions. The Stoics believed the highest form of strength was to become an observer instead. A reactor says, "Why did they say that? Why did they act like that? What did they mean?" But an observer says, "What impression just hit my mind? And is it true?" A reactor assumes. An observer examines. A reactor spirals. An observer breathes. A reactor interprets everything as personal. An observer sees the event as neutral and the judgment as optional. The shift is subtle. But once it happens, your entire inner world reorganizes itself. You stop being played by your emotions. You stop being manipulated by the unknown. You stop being enslaved by assumptions. You reclaim the throne of your mind. The closing message: freedom begins with 1 second of awareness. You might think Stoicism demands perfection. It doesn't. It demands presence. Just 1 second, 1 breath between the event and your reaction is enough to change everything. In that single second, you ask the Stoics' most important question: is this true, or is this just my interpretation? That one question breaks the chain. It dissolves the imagined threat. It exposes the fear. It turns the emotional storm into something you can observe rather than drown in. Freedom does not begin with controlling the world. Freedom begins with controlling the story. The final Stoic challenge: practice the pause. Here is the challenge the Stoics would give you. For the next 24 hours, do not trust the first interpretation your mind gives you. When someone is quiet, pause. When a message is short, pause. When you begin to assume, pause. When your stomach tightens, pause. When you feel attacked, pause. When you feel ignored, pause. When you feel rejected, pause. Between the event and your reaction, insert 1 breath. 1 question. 1 moment of clarity. What actually happened here? And what part of this is just my mind filling the gaps? If you practice this consistently, even badly, something extraordinary begins to happen. You stop reacting. You start choosing. You stop assuming. You start understanding. You stop collapsing into emotion. You start rising into reason. And slowly, you become the kind of person the Stoics described. A person who is not controlled by the world, but who moves through the world with calm, direction, dignity, and inner power. The final line. In the end, the Stoics weren't teaching philosophy. They were teaching freedom. And freedom begins the moment you realize it was never the world disturbing you. It was always your interpretation. Change that, and you change everything.